Welcome to CoI'Q, a first-of-its-kind video program about health innovators, early adopters, and influencers, and their stories about riding the roller coaster of healthcare innovation. I'm your host, Dr. Roxie, founder of Legacy DNA Marketing Group, and it's time to raise our CoI'Q. Welcome back, CoI'Q listeners. On today's show, we're cutting another solo episode with Matt Johnson, our executive producer for the video and podcast show. Thank you so much for joining us.
Roxie, pleasure as always.
Awesome. And you have your own podcast show.
I do, and enjoy having kinds of deep conversations. So on my own podcast, we talk a lot about strategy in the area that I operate in. So when I show up to these, I know I'm going to have a really in-depth, really good conversation, and I end up pulling things out of this that I can go apply into my own business, which is a blast for me. But we're going to talk about strategy on the fly, strategy being kind of static, and there's this idea, and I think a lot of people have, it doesn't matter what field you're in, but especially it seems like in healthcare, that hey, you just get the strategy right once, and then just let's hit the ground running, let's get to market, let's get out, get it in front of systems, get in front of users, let's just get out there and do it, right? And then that will take care of itself. And it kind of goes back to the thing we've talked about before, which is that hey, as long as you have the best solution, it's going to win out, which we've dealt with before. We know that that's not true. So let's talk about strategy a little bit. What's your feeling on it?
Well, and I think that it's, all entrepreneurs. I've never met an entrepreneur that didn't really operate fast and furious, right? And so the idea of leapfrogging over strategy and getting into the tactics just makes, entrepreneurs feel good. They're making progress and they're that much closer to success. But that can be a losing strategy. Without even realizing it, right?
Yeah, 100%. Well, yeah, because there's other people involved. We've talked about this on previous episodes, that it's not up to us. We can think we have the most awesome thing, but there's, especially in healthcare with it being multi-sided, there's so many things to consider. Even just one element, which you mentioned on a previous episode, the fact that sometimes the people who use a product or an innovation are not the people who pay for it. That alone introduces so much complexity in the decision of who are you selling to and who's buying it and who are you marketing it to. That's just one element of a strategy that can have all sorts of implications up and down our entire business. So anyway, let's jump into, like, if you had kind of, I guess, when you look around at the market and you see what people are doing, both the innovators themselves who are leading the companies and developing new solutions, and the people that they pay to help them with their strategy, essentially you're seeing kind of the same problem. What is that problem?
So most of the time, there isn't a framework for that decision making to take place. So It's a little bit more willy-nilly, kind of ad hoc. And so, there's all sorts of inherent challenges to that. I may be leaving some strategic decisions on the table that I'm not even aware that I need to make, or I may be overlooking some of the connections between those strategic decisions. And so, none of these decisions kind of function in a silo or kind of independent. They're all interrelated. And so if I don't have a framework that, mind you, is based upon some type of theoretical principle, right? So it has to have some type of backbone and credibility to it, that I'm going to be more susceptible to failure. And like we've talked about on some other episodes, that, the failure rate is really high. 95% of innovations that are brought to market fail. So what is one of the first steps that health innovators can do to kind of beat those odds is to have a framework for those commercialization decisions, all the way from concept to launch and beyond. Yeah, agreed. And you mentioned the typical entrepreneur being kind of the fast and the furious. We all have that idea that, well, if 95% of businesses fail, those are the dumb ones. I'm in the 5%. Right. That's not going to... I am the 5%.
That's happening to me. Come on now.
Completely. 100%. We all think, well, and that's, there's a lot of beauty in that, because that's why we're entrepreneurs. That's why we're creating things that don't exist. And it's that kind of optimism that really fuels us and helps us overcome all those hurdles that we face in this journey. That is
100% true. Everything is a trade-off and a balance. It's yin and yang. All right. So when we look at having a framework, so we talked a little bit about, like doing strategy on the fly, which most of us do, obviously. Having a framework basically lets you know exactly what all the factors are that you should be taking into account before you even sit down to make the decision. So when I think about that, to me, that means having a better idea, like a roadmap, better vision, almost like taking the blinders off. But it also means you kind of know, if you know all the factors that go into it, you probably know, okay, here are the 5 things I don't really know, and I've never really taken the time to even ask the market. And I know that's part of your strategic framework, is knowing who and when to go ask to get the data that you need, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's really, it's all of those decisions that collectively, define that commercialization process. And every decision that's being made, you're building confidence because you're taking the time to kind of wrestle with the research, wrestle with the data, kind of double check or play devil's advocate with some of your assumptions. There's so much bias that's just kind of inherent to this whole process. So a lot of times, health innovators want to move fast and furious and get to market because we're all, trying to win and be first to market. But the reality is success is slowing down just a little bit to wrestle with those assumptions, kind of think a little bit differently, think a little bit deeper about these decisions, because I guarantee you that when you have this, proven framework, that this strategy that you have as an output is going to be very different than if you didn't take the time to wrestle with some of those ideas. I've seen it happen time and time again.
Yeah, I read something really interesting. I think it was actually just yesterday. I stumbled across this little piece of information. I was working on some content for my own book, which I know you're working on yours as well. I think ours are actually going to come out around the same time, September, October-ish,
Awesome.
which is awesome.
Yeah. Exciting.
Yeah, I know. So we're both in the kind of the strategy and the deep thinking, good decision making business. Mm-hmm. So I stumbled across a piece of information which was about Napoleon, which is widely considered like the greatest military thinker and strategist of all time. One of the things that he was famous for was the always proceeding with 2 options. In other words, he never considered strategy to be something that he did back at the palace and then you just kind of carry out on the ground. Right. Strategy was basically just like, hey, this is how we make decisions, and it's always this kind of iterative process. So he learned how to set strategy in such a way that it gave him options and maneuverability later on. I think that's one of the key things, that if you're working with a good thinker, someone like you, if you're a health innovator and they're working with you, I think you have the ability to kind of lead them through a process of setting strategy and making good decisions. It's not about cutting yourself off from decisions. It's about creating options so you can move with whatever the market wants, because that's always changing.
And being flexible, because consumer needs aren't fixed, market trends aren't fixed, competitors aren't fixed. So those things are continuously evolving and changing. And so, the work that I do with folks is that we're developing that emergent strategy that we're going to go to the market and test.
Yes.
And so even the work that we do together over this 12-week period is, we're not saying that at the end of those 12 weeks that all those decisions are fixed and we're confident that this is the exact strategy for going to market. We're just saying that we believe that this is our most profitable strategy based upon the data and the research and the framework that we've used. And then we go into the market and it's still iterative and an iterative and flexible process, because we're continuously infusing new learnings throughout that.
Yeah, which is, we alluded to it before we hit record, but I wanted to bring it into this conversation. You mentioned something that basically the waterfall doesn't work, right? That kind of project management decision style. Explain a little bit about what you mean by that, because that is, we think of it in terms of, if you were to kind of lay out this process of setting your strategy, that's probably what most people would do. Okay, I'm going to make this set of decisions and then lock those down. And then I'm going to make the next set of decisions and lock those down and shove them in a closet because they're made, right? Is that what you mean by the waterfall method?
Yeah. And, and to your point about, Napoleon, when he's out on the field, the battlefield, he's not like, oh, well, you know what? The opposing team, did something differently and now our strategy is not effective, but we made that decision And so we're going forward with it anyway, right?
Right.
They're adapting and changing. And so, the waterfall method can be successful in a lot of applications, but I think when it comes to developing your commercialization strategy, that it's just really not flexible enough. We need more of an agile methodology that we're using to build that commercialization strategy, because like you said, it's not fixed where you're making decisions and it's in this specific static sequence of events. It's not like one thing happens and then it ends and then another decision is made and then that ends and so forth. It's iterative. It just continues of, build, test, iterate, build, test, iterate. And really sometimes it's hard for health innovators to kind of swallow, because we want to check it off the list. We want to mark it as done. But this is really a process that happens throughout the entire life of the company, because it's always changing. And so we will get to a point where we believe that we've got a deliberate strategy that we say, okay, we've identified product market fit, and we believe that this is going to be our scalable strategy for scaling the business and really growing. But even at that point, you're still analyzing the landscape.
Even if it's just insurance, like evaluating new competitors, evaluating the trend in your overall market niche, like you always need to be, eyes open. It's I think one of the things that entrepreneurs would love to be true, but it's not true, is that success comes from putting the blinders on and just working your tail off, and then everything will be fine. I wish that was the case, because if the only thing that separated us from success was hard work, well then, there'd be a lot more successful people. Sadly, that's not the case. So I don't think we can really ever take the blinders and keep them on. We need to kind of always have the blinders off. We need to focus on what we're doing, execute the strategy we've set, but still be consistently keeping our eyes open and knowing what to look for. And that's where that strategy framework kind of helps. Even once we know what we're doing for the next 90 days, understanding and having that framework in place gives you a way to consistently reevaluate your strategy without starting from scratch every time. You're just looking for the specific factors that are important.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think focus is key, right? So if you are a startup or an emergent company, you're usually short on cash, you're usually short on people, and what you've got the most of is things to do. And so how do you, so this kind of gives you a framework of what decisions do you need to make now that are going to have the most impact to your success. And so it kind of gives you this sequencing of decision making, and then helping you kind of connect the dots between that decision making, so that way you are maximizing the use of your resources, both time and money, and really knowing where to focus. Because it's really, I think that's a big pitfall, is that as an entrepreneur, that I have so many things to do that I don't know what to do when. And so I'm spread too thin, and I'm just distracted, and I'm not getting the results that I'm looking for. So, having that framework really kind of gives us guardrails in that decision-making process.
Yeah, it's a good way to put it. Almost like bowling with bumper rails makes it a lot easier. It's the only way I bowl 300.
It's the only way we don't end up in the gutter.
That's fine. All right, so you're doing a whole, speaking of like the strategic process and getting the right input and feedback, so you're doing this workshop you've got coming up at a big healthcare event. So tell people just a little bit briefly about the workshop and where they can learn more and connect.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're going to be doing a workshop on patient product co-creation at the Connected Health Conference in Boston in October. I'd love to see you there. And you can get more information about it on the Connected Health website.
Awesome. And then besides, kind of listening to the podcast on Apple Podcasts and Spotify and Stitcher and all the usual places, and leaving you a lovely 5-star review for all your glorious content and good guests that you have, besides that fun stuff, which people should do, where else can they go to kind of dive deeper into the framework and learn more about the strategic work that you do?
Yeah, absolutely. They can visit our website, legacy-dna.com.
Very cool. You've got all kinds of fun resources there. Awesome. Roxie, it's a pleasure. I love talking about this stuff. It's always a blast.
Thanks, Matt. Appreciate it. What's the difference between launching and commercializing a healthcare innovation? Many people will launch a new product. Few will commercialize it. To learn the difference between launch and commercialization, and to watch past episodes of the show, head to our video show page at drroxie.com. Thanks so much for watching and listening to the show. You can subscribe to the latest episodes on your favorite podcast app. like Apple Podcasts and Spotify, or subscribe to the video episodes on our YouTube channel. No matter the platform, just search CoI'Q with Dr. Roxie. Until next time, let's raise our CoI'Q.